Close your eyes. Let the world around you fade completely. Tonight we travel to Florence, Italy. The year's 1490. In a workshop lit only by candlelight, a man is working. He has been working for hours. He will work for hours more. Outside, the city has long since fallen asleep. He barely notices. His name was Leonardo da Vinci, and unlike almost every other human being who has ever lived, sleep was something he treated as a problem to be solved rather than a necessity to be surrendered to. Breathe slowly, let your body grow heavier. You are safe in the quiet dark, just listening. Leonardo was born on April 15th, 1452 in a small Tuscan village called Anciano near the town of Vinci. He was illegitimate, born to a notary named Ser Piero da Vinci and a peasant woman named Caterina, who were not married to each other and would never be. In the rigid social structure of 15th century Italy, this accident of birth carried consequences that would shape the entire course of his life. He could not inherit his father's profession. He could not attend university in the formal sense. He could not enter certain guilds or hold certain offices. He was, from the very beginning, an outsider. Some biographers believe this exclusion was not entirely a tragedy. Freed from the expected path of a legitimate son, Leonardo was never channeled into a single discipline. He never had to choose between art and science, between beauty and function, between the visible world and the invisible forces that governed it. He could be everything because he belonged to nothing specific. He belonged to everything. His mother raised him for the first few years of his life. Then, around age 5, he was taken to live with his father and his father's legitimate family, including a stepmother who, by most accounts, treated him with relative warmth. His grandfather, Antonio, seemed to take particular delight in the boy. Leonardo later described long hours spent outdoors with his grandfather, studying birds in flight, the movement of water in streams, the way light changed across a hillside at different times of day. These early observations were not idle wandering. They were the beginning of a lifelong practice of watching the world with extraordinary precision and asking why. Why does a bird bank left rather than right in a crosswind? What forces act on water as it moves around a stone? Why does the sky appear blue rather than colorless? Most children ask why once or twice. Leonardo never stopped. Let your breath slow now, like candlelight in a very still room. His formal education was limited. He learned to read and write and gained basic arithmetic, but his true education happened largely through direct observation of the world around him. At around age 14, he was apprenticed to one of the most respected workshops in Florence, run by the artist and sculptor Andrea del Verrocchio. And here, in the cramped, paint-scented rooms of that Florentine workshop, something extraordinary began to unfold. Verrocchio's workshop was one of the great creative engines of Renaissance Florence. It produced paintings, sculptures, metalwork, jewelry, stage designs for civic celebrations, architectural drawings, and almost anything else the wealthy families of Florence might commission. Leonardo arrived as an apprentice and quickly became something else entirely. Verrocchio, the story goes, stopped painting after seeing what his young apprentice was capable of. Whether or not this is literally true, it captures something real. The young Leonardo possessed an ability that went beyond technical skill into something that seemed almost unfair. He could make things look alive, not merely accurate, not merely beautiful, alive. The figures in his paintings seemed to breathe. light fell on surfaces the way it actually fell, not the way convention dictated it should. Expressions held the ambiguity of real human emotion rather than the clean legibility of symbolic poses. He achieved this through relentless study. He filled sketchbook after sketchbook with observations, studies of hands in dozens of positions, eyes in different lighting conditions, folds of fabric under varying degrees of tension, horses mid-stride, birds with wings at every angle of extension. He did not draw what he thought things looked like. He drew what they actually looked like after looking at them with almost inhuman patience and precision. This same precision extended to everything around him. Let your body grow heavier now, deeper into rest. During his years in Florence and later in Milan, Leonardo began keeping notebooks, not sketchbooks only, but working documents that contained everything, annotated drawings of machines, observations about weather patterns, notes on the properties of water, recipes for paint mixtures, philosophical reflections, shopping lists, reminders to himself, rough drafts of letters, fragments of poetry. The notebooks were written in his distinctive mirror script, from right to left across the page, legible only when held up to a mirror. The reason for this has been debated for centuries. Some suggest he was left-handed and found it easier to write in this direction to avoid smearing wet ink. Some believe he was protecting his ideas from casual readers. Some have proposed it was simply a private habit that became permanent. Leonardo himself never explained it. What we do know is that he maintained this practice throughout his life, filling page after page with a script that required a mirror to read, in notebooks that were never intended for publication, never fully organized, never completed in any conventional sense. They were, in the most literal way, the record of a mind thinking out loud across decades. Let your breath settle. There is nothing you need to hold on to tonight. Sometime during his years in Milan, working for the Duke Ludovico Sforza, Leonardo developed or formalized a sleep practice that would later fascinate researchers and productivity writers alike. He slept approximately 20 minutes at a time, roughly every 4 hours, 6 short sleeps distributed across the full 24 hours of the day, totaling somewhere between 90 minutes and 2 hours of sleep in total. The rest of the time he worked. This practice, now known as polyphasic sleep, has been studied by modern sleep researchers with complicated results. The evidence suggests that human beings can adapt to compressed sleep schedules, particularly those that involve multiple short periods throughout the day, but at significant cognitive costs over extended periods. How Leonardo maintained this schedule for years without apparent deterioration in his extraordinary output remains genuinely puzzling. The most generous explanation is that he was simply wired differently, that his nervous system processed sleep more efficiently than most, or that he slept more than the historical record suggests, and the 20-minute nap story has been romanticized over centuries. The less generous explanation is that he was chronically sleep deprived and perhaps produced his greatest work, not despite this, but in the particular heightened, slightly dissociated mental state that extreme fatigue can sometimes produce in unusually creative minds. We cannot know for certain. The historical record is clear that he slept very little by conventional standards. The record is much less clear about the exact mechanism and effect. What we do know is this: by any measure, his output was staggering. Let your thoughts drift now, slow as candle smoke, rising in still air. In the 30 or so years of his mature work in life, Leonardo produced paintings that are still studied in art schools around the world 500 years later. He filled over 7,000 pages of notebooks with observations and designs, most of which were never built or published in his lifetime. He conducted systematic anatomical studies of the human body, dissecting over 30 corpses, producing drawings of such accuracy that modern medical illustrators have described them as essentially correct. He designed machines, many of which were technically feasible and were eventually built and found to work when reconstructed centuries later. He did all of this while also serving as a court entertainer, an organizer of theatrical spectacles, a military engineer, a hydraulic consultant, and an architectural advisor. All of it on approximately 2 hours of sleep per night. There was a darker dimension to Leonardo's research that his notebooks record with the same calm precision he applied to everything else. Human anatomy in the 15th and 16th centuries was a deeply restricted field. The church regulated the handling of human remains. Dissection was technically illegal in most circumstances and required special permissions that were difficult to obtain and rarely granted. Leonardo obtained bodies anyway, through connections at hospitals, through arrangements made quietly with gravediggers, through circumstances that the notebooks do not always specify. He managed to dissect over 30 human corpses over the course of his career. He worked at night by candlelight in cold rooms where the smell was, as he noted in his own handwriting, nearly unbearable. He worked alone. He drew what he found with the same obsessive precision he brought to everything, producing images of the human interior that were not merely accurate, but beautiful in their own right. The bones and muscles and vessels rendered with a clarity and elegance that no medical text of the era approached. He studied the eye, the heart, the developing fetus in the womb. He traced the pathways of nerves. He mapped the structure of the spine. He was trying, he wrote in his notebooks, to understand the mechanics of life itself, not in a metaphysical sense, in a literal engineering sense. How does the machine work? What are the moving parts? What forces govern them? Let your breath grow quiet now, your body completely still. He never published this work. The notebooks remained private, passed through various hands after his death, partially lost, partially damaged, scattered across collections in England, France, Italy, Spain, and beyond. It would take centuries for the full scope of his anatomical drawings to be properly cataloged and understood. When they finally were, modern anatomists confirmed what must have been obvious to anyone who looked carefully. The drawings were extraordinary in their accuracy and insight, produced by a man working alone in secret without formal medical training, by candlelight in the middle of the night. In 1516, Leonardo accepted an invitation from the French King Francis I to come to France. He was 64 years old. He had suffered a stroke that had partially paralyzed his right hand, the hand he used for painting, though he was left-handed and had always painted with his left. He traveled to the Château de Clos-Lucé, a small manor house near the royal palace of Amboise in the Loire Valley. He brought with him 3 paintings he had been working on for years, including the Mona Lisa. He brought his notebooks. He brought his assistant, Gian Giacomo Caproti, known as Salai, who had been with him for over 20 years, a relationship whose exact nature historians still debate. He brought Francesco Melzi, a young nobleman who had become his devoted pupil and would eventually inherit his notebooks. At Clos Lucé, he was given a generous pension, a comfortable home, and almost complete freedom. King Francis, by multiple accounts, genuinely loved the old man, visiting him frequently, sitting with him for hours in conversation that the king later described as among the most stimulating of his life. Leonardo spent his final years sketching, thinking, and apparently doing very little that produced a finished work in any conventional sense. Let your breath grow soft now, like the sound of a river heard from far away. He died on May 2nd, 1519, at the age of 67. The cause was most likely a stroke. Francis was reportedly present at his death, though historians debate the details of this account. He left behind the notebooks, the paintings, and an inventory of his possessions that included musical instruments, books, clothing, and various objects of scientific curiosity. He left behind no completed architectural structure, no built machine, no published scientific text. He left behind instead the record of a mind that had moved across the surface of almost every discipline human beings had yet developed and had seen further in almost all of them than anyone else of his time. The notebooks sat largely unread, scattered across Europe, slowly being lost or damaged or misattributed for nearly 4 centuries after his death. The full picture of what he had actually known and understood and designed would not become clear until the 20th century, when systematic efforts were finally made to catalog and study everything he had left behind. What emerged was something that even the most generous assessments of his genius had underestimated. Let that settle quietly over you now. A man who slept 2 hours a night and spent the rest of his time looking at the world with more precision and curiosity and patient attention than almost any human being before or since. He never finished the Mona Lisa to his own satisfaction. He never built the flying machines he designed. He never published the anatomical studies that would have transformed medicine by centuries. He simply kept working, kept watching, kept filling pages with questions and observations and designs that the world was not yet ready to use. There is something quietly profound in that. Not all great work is finished. Not all great ideas find their moment in the lifetime of the person who first imagined them. Some minds simply arrive too early for the world around them and spend their lives gesturing toward a future they cannot quite reach. Let your body grow completely heavy now. Let your breath slow to almost nothing. You are somewhere safe and warm tonight, far from cold Florentine workshops, far from secret midnight dissections and notebooks no one was meant to read. Just here, just breathing. The Mona Lisa still hangs in Paris tonight. Millions of people walk past it every year and try to understand the expression on her face. Leonardo never told anyone what it meant. Perhaps he didn't know himself, or perhaps he knew exactly and simply decided that some things were more interesting as questions than as answers. Sleep now. The candle has burned down to almost nothing, and the workshop is finally completely quiet.